Welcome to another year in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 249, and I hope you all had an incredible Gregorian New Year in the Matrix. Welcome to 2026, or whatever year they're calling it, which, by the way, is not just another year. In my opinion, and I don't say this to discourage, but rather to inspire, in my opinion, I personally see 2026 as the year where you really need to establish what your vision is. This is the year to get clear on how you envision yourself operating moving forward, whether that be alone in your self work or with your family in your community. 2026 is the year to really get clear on how you plan to maneuver through this rapidly changing world. So, now that we've kicked off this exoteric new year, take some time to meditate on that. For real. And we'll, of course, talk more about what I'm personally focusing on here in 2026, more in depth next week. But for now, since today's Red Pill is a What I'm Investing in special, that means I'll be covering over 25 different charts. So let's not waste any time and get straight into today's Red Pill. Quickly, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed. Make sure to get comfortable. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer or any beverage of your choice. Have a little fun. Also, please make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. By the way, since I am doing a What I'm Investing in special here today, that means we'll be combining last week's votes with this upcoming week's votes. Pick about 5 out of the total that you guys voted on last week and this week, and that will be the projects we cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. So just make sure you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 2 to 3 months. If it's been over 2 to 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin. And please include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, as I said, we'll be selecting those 4 to 5 projects next week. Now, let's kick this off with a reminder of the key dates that are ahead of January 6th and 7th. I've been talking about these for the past 6 weeks since the Red Pill podcast I released back on November 23rd, which will officially be happening this Tuesday and Wednesday, January 6th and 7th. And just a quick recap, the way that I identified those dates was by utilizing the pattern we continue to see in the Bitcoin chart throughout the entire year of 2025. And the pattern was the 47 code. And if you take from the pivot low that happened on November 21st, right over here, over 47 days, you land on the date of January 7th. And what's very important about this is the fact that if you take from the all-time high that Bitcoin hit, which was on October 6th, over to this date of November 21st, you're going to see how that was also 47 days. And then also the November 21st date happened to be within the 47th week of the year. Now, if you want to learn more about this 47 code, just watch last week's Red Pill podcast that was dedicated to decoding silver, and you'll learn everything you need to know about this 47 code. That podcast was pretty much a decoding masterclass, and I appreciate all the feedback you guys shared with me over the week. It really means a lot to me. It seems that many of you really enjoyed that decode to get a more unique take on silver. But now, returning back to what we want to focus on moving forward, we do in fact have this key date right around the corner of the 6th and the 7th of January. So we will definitely see some insane volatility this week, especially around those dates. And if we are to have some volatility around these dates, you shouldn't be shocked. It's pretty clear, at least in crypto, that once we made it through the Gregorian year of 2020 into 2026, right when we got there into January 1st, it's kind of felt like a fresh reset in a way, like a refresh. And I believe time capitulation did its job. And obviously, the leverage reset took care of most of the shaking out, especially since a majority of retail investors are essentially exclusively using leverage over the past couple of years. It's typical once we make it through a little over 2 to 3 months of downwards pressure coupled with extreme fear sentiment in the market. This is pretty much when you would expect a relief rally. So what we're going to do now is we're going to capitulate with an honorable mention of the 3 scenarios that I shared for Bitcoin and XRP back in late November, moving into early December, just a little over a month ago. And for those of you who remembered, all 3 scenarios were pointing up. It's kind of funny. People heard me mention 3 scenarios, and some people were kind of trolling in the comments like, well, you could go up, down, or sideways, so of course you'll be right. And it's like, no, well, you didn't watch the podcast, and all 3 of my scenarios were pointing up. And the criticism is welcome, but it was just funny that people made that statement. Anywho, from where we are actively trading at the time, the nuances of those 3 scenarios were numbered accordingly to the higher probability that I was personally expecting. Therefore, what I called scenario number 1 was what I was expecting to be the higher probability outcome, as I just said, and that was to see Bitcoin trading between 80K, which so far is our low back on November 21st, which was in the 47th week of the year, 47 days after the all-time high, and for us to trade between 80K to 100K for 47 days, from November 21st to January 7th. And now that we're about 3 days out from completing those 47 days, we could confirm that was in fact the scenario that ended up playing out for not only Bitcoin, but also for XRP. Again, right after I made that decode, I believe it was back on November 23rd, I followed it up a couple red pills later with sharing my 3 scenarios on XRP. So you could go back and watch that if you want to learn more. There was a lot of information that really dialed in on specifically XRP. And here we are recently, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a breakout recovery initiating on XRP. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in today's podcast. But now that we're coming to the end of this time frame, these 47 days of sideways for Bitcoin in this particular trading range that we isolated. Now that this upcoming Wednesday will seal the deal on those 47 days, the next question becomes, so what are you expecting next? And this is where I'd start to entertain scenario number 2, which is the relief rally concept. Now, some of you might be laughing because you're mentioning that people would point out that 3 scenarios could be up, down, or sideways. And the idea here for the sideways was that it was within a particular price range and also in a particular range of dates. So that was really why it was powerful. It's not just to say, sure, that means up, but really what I meant by quote unquote up was the fact that the podcast was made right after we had the lows. So that's what I meant by up. It's that I did not expect us to continue going lower at that time, just sideways and between that particular price range. So as I mentioned, this is where I would start to entertain scenario number 2, which is the relief rally concept. And I kind of hinted to that a little bit ago with regards to us being overly bearish. We're having a long-term corrective phase. It's now been almost 3 months. We've been seeing pretty much nothing but extreme fear. This is kind of the time where we expect a relief rally. So now let's unpack specifically how I anticipate the relief rally to play out, because that's a vague term. Okay, relief rallies come in many different shapes and forms. So let's get specific here. First, please be aware that in the immediate short term, we're currently completing a very bullish weekend here in crypto land with crypto trading alone until just moments ago, where we've had Forex open, precious metals, as well as the CME. And the reason why I'm kind of prefacing this is because we have 2 CME gaps right now. We have one right here, kind of completing the 90K retest, and then as well around 88K on the Bitcoin Chicago Mercantile Exchange futures chart. So we've been pretty bullish since the new year. in this recovery. And that is why I just want us to like relax. Yes, it's exciting if we are to just see Bitcoin rage straight to 100K, but I want everyone to be calm. Be calm, wolves. It's the best energy to carry, especially also, by the way, happy wolf moon. It was just yesterday. I almost forgot. This is our moon. So great to see this price action, of course, but it's very important that we stay focused and we don't get emotional right now. So just kind of letting you know that we've had a very bullish weekend, especially since the start of the year. And when you hear the term relief rally, it doesn't mean that there can't be turbulence along the way, especially when you're focusing on crypto, right? You're all well aware how volatile this asset class is. So just keep that in mind as we push into a new week with the stock market reopening tomorrow. For some of you, you might be already watching this a little bit later after it's been released, and the stock market might already be actively open. And we've had a theme here in crypto with the stock market where like once we get to around 9-10 a.m. Eastern time, the market likes to do some weird stuff, and that's been all of this over here. Bitcoin pushing up to 93 over and over and over again and getting rejected. So, also, we can't forget the fact that we have these key dates of January 6th and January 7th this week. So although we've been trading sideways for Bitcoin for the past 47 days, and altcoins have actually been continuing a downtrend, coupled with a record-breaking streak of extreme fear in the crypto market, that naturally means that we're ready to have some notable relief to the upside. But when things are very bearish, you have to deal with the breakout phase, and that means you're coming up against resistance, and there could be a lot of chop, especially when you're trying to break through the resistance on altcoins particularly. So now that we set the tone for that, the next key date on my radar, since we're moving through my first set of key dates just this week, some of you might be wondering like, well, how are you anticipating this next phase to play out, what I'm calling scenario number 2? And what are the dates? So this actually won't be a new date for many of you, since you've heard me mention it so many times, but that's the upcoming annular solar eclipse on February 17th. Which you can see over here is about 43 days away or so. Now, this isn't just any other eclipse because it's an eclipse that lands on the Lunar New Year, kicking off the Chinese Year of the Horse, which, as promised, I'll have a full presentation released in early February dedicated to the Year of the Horse decoded, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, this is a very important date in my work, because this upcoming eclipse season is actually kind of controversial for our community specifically, since of course this whole solar and lunar cycle theory has become the main theme of my channel, Waters Above, for pretty much just a little over 3 full years now. So a majority of the time that I've had my channel, I've been leveraging on this theory quite a bit. Some of you might not be aware that Waters Above is moving into year 5 quite soon, actually, the end of March. So I'll definitely have something really excited planned for that, but I won't go too deep into it now. Anyways, that just means that 3 out of the 4.5 or 4+ years have been really focused on this solar and lunar cycle theory. And the reason I say this upcoming eclipse season is, quote, controversial is because some other respected members in our community here have their own take on when the next solar cycle officially starts, whilst I'm leaning more on this eclipse season being the start of the next solar cycle. And for the sake of time today, we can't go so deep down the rabbit hole with this, but you could, of course, expect me to dive way deeper into it in the solar and lunar cycle theory in the upcoming Year of the Horse decoded. It's coming very soon, just 1 month away. But for now, regardless of when the official start of the next solar cycle is, it's very clear that for the overwhelming majority of the crypto market, most projects topped back in Q4 2024 into Q1 at the start of last year around Trump's inauguration. And that's significant because the first total lunar eclipse of that previous solar cycle that came to a conclusion was March 14th of last year, 2025. And of course, we had the significant crash across the board into that exact eclipse season. And here we are in 2026, and our final total lunar eclipse will also be in March. The technical final total lunar eclipse on March 3rd. And then we won't have another full total lunar eclipse until New Year's Eve in 2028. Literally, our next total lunar eclipse lands on New Year's in 2029. How wild is that? Especially since we're just starting off this new year here in 2026. That's 3 years away, man. And I suppose what makes some other esoteric investors here feel that the lunar cycle isn't over on the upcoming March lunar eclipse that I'm referencing is this partial lunar eclipse at the end of August this year. But as for my take on this, personally, I feel full total eclipses are all that matters for my theory, at least. But that, of course, doesn't mean I'll completely count out someone else's take on this, because it's crucial to collaborate on such a unique form of analysis. So I love the fact that our community is sharing their own view on what they feel is to come with regards to my solar and lunar cycle theory. I feel like it's way cooler to share something and then have everyone provide what they're thinking. That's what makes this community so awesome. So anyways, although I have my own take on this, it doesn't mean I'm discounting the power of the August eclipse season, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So with this knowledge, this is ultimately why back in late November I stated publicly that we're either finishing an altcoin bear market or we're about to experience the shortest Bitcoin bear market in history. Let me say that again. We're either finishing an altcoin bear market or we're about to experience the shortest Bitcoin bear market in history. Now, when it comes to the start of a new eclipse season, which by the way, I could probably show you the chart while we're talking about it. It's this one right here. I'll turn off all this jazz. We don't immediately see a pivot in altcoins. We saw a notable pivot into the last solar cycle for Bitcoin, which I'm personally expecting into August. But with that being said, this October pivot in 2023 was crazy for altcoins. While Bitcoin was actually going up, alts weren't looking so incredible during this phase. But once we made that pivot there, at that total solar eclipse on October, 2023, alts went nuts. Okay. And a lot of them were already down 95, 99%. So this is something to keep in mind for the year of 2020, the end of 2026 for sure, but then also for 2027. And it sounds like we're getting ahead of ourselves, but guys, like, this cycle is different. This is not the same. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today and moving forward will be a new energy, on this whole solar and lunar cycle stuff. Because I hear a lot of people now talking about the quote unquote 5-year cycle. And my truth was that it was never the 4-year cycle. And it's weird how people are now calling it the 5-year cycle. It's not that. It's the solar or the lunar cycle. And this is why I'm really fascinated by this cycle over here, which, as you can see, it was a shortened eclipse cycle for the lunar eclipses, but Bitcoin did what it does every single time. It bottomed around the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, the final full total lunar eclipse, by the way, not a partial, and then it pivoted up. Same thing we did last cycle. So this is fascinating how this was back at the end of June into July, call it the summer of 2019. And we have a similar posture for the summer of 2026. But this wasn't so fun. You can see that Bitcoin did effectively top at the start of the solar cycle, and then we had a pretty notable correction. We even had a black swan event in the midst of this. So you can see the pivot, though, after the second solar eclipse. Here, you have the same thing. We had a pivot after the second solar eclipse. This is an unbelievable thing to be looking at, guys, to have this knowledge and awareness. And although, yes, this cycle didn't have the textbook alt season, this is still an unbelievable piece of knowledge to have at your disposal. So We're going to continue to refine this and get better at understanding this as we go. But so far, Bitcoin is doing what it normally does in relation to the eclipses. And with this being a shortened lunar cycle, that does not shock me as much now why we did not have a normal alt season when we look back at everything, all things considered. And then we also have to think of how bloody the bear market was for a lot of altcoins, even top altcoins, including Solana, which lost like 95% of its value. So if you got in at the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle in Solana, you wouldn't really care so much about a perfect alt season. The same thing with the move on XRP. I know a lot of people they want much, 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 much higher, but XRP is at $2 now, and it was giving us opportunities to buy at 30 and 40 cents in the last cycle before it just broke out in a straight line. And then all of 2025, it held $2 range. I would call that a pretty successful investment, but that's besides the point. In crypto, especially in altcoins, everybody's greedy. I'm even greedy. I could admit it. We all get greedy here, and we can't just accept the fact that the ROI is wild in crypto land, but also the losses and the corrections can be equally messed up. So 2025 was what it was, a snake year. Now that we're moving into this new year, some people that are even aware of the Chinese zodiac element, they're bringing up, well, look back at 2014 and how that cycle went. Well, I don't think 2014 has the same eclipses, in my opinion. I just don't. But what I can point out was how 2015 we bottomed in January, and Bitcoin is effectively like an altcoin back here, right? The way altcoins look is how Bitcoin used to be, right? That's natural. So I've been pointing that out too. The setup of eclipses for April of 2015 is identical to what we're dealing with right now, which makes me also incredibly bullish for 2026. And I don't say bullish because I just want to be on the side of the bulls. I say that because I'm throwing in everything right now, all of these elements. So I don't think that we're just going to have a typical year of the horse where we're going to repeat this because the eclipses were different. You can't just take the Chinese year and call it a day. So it's really fascinating. Also, another thing is the fact that we've been doing the opposite of what the end of the year, or pretty much all of 2013. And I talked about that recently too, how we had a major move up into right over here, April 2013, year of the snake. This 2025 year of the snake, we crashed in April, right? And then we had a major peak in July this year, but back then it was a low. Then we crashed into November, the end of November, into December, we crashed 2025 just recently, and this was the most bullish time back in 2013. So I'm not saying that this pattern will continue. I don't believe it will, but that is very fascinating how Bitcoin did have a bull run. It's still technically in a bull run. It's $90,000 right now. Don't forget that. And in the midst of all of this, we started kind of mirroring opposite behavior, and that's very similar to 2024 as well. We've talked about that too. So I don't want to jump around into too many directions here, but I hope you guys appreciate the stream of consciousness because this is a very unique, form of analysis, of course. So with this knowledge, this is ultimately why back in November, I stated what I stated regarding that we're either finishing an altcoin bear market or we're about to experience the shortest Bitcoin bear market in history. And my reason for that was because of my eclipse theory, which we've just talked about pretty heavily. And the way ultimately that the eclipses are staggered from this year here in 2026 until New Year's in 2029. So we are either bottoming, and when I say bottoming, I don't necessarily mean just for Bitcoin. I mean, in general, we are either bottoming into this upcoming March lunar eclipse or we're bottoming into the August eclipse season. But either are acceptable for me as a long-term investor. And who could argue otherwise? When you know that the solar cycle energy is right around the corner. And on top of that, we have the Fed initiating QE this year. We have a new Fed chair. You know they're going to milk that narrative. Liquidity is on our side, along with the esoteric energetics. And to me, that's a win-win. But with that being said, that doesn't mean I'm expecting a brand new all-time high in the immediate short term either. Okay, so don't get my words twisted here. Unless something wild happens, which of course, if there's a year for something wild to go down, this is the one. Just look at how the start of 2026 has been already with the Venezuela event, right? So yeah, man. So with the fact that we have two major eclipse seasons this year, one concluding in March and the other in August, to me that means the month of May and June will be very, very interesting this year. Effectively because they're seated between this year's eclipse seasons. And that was very much the case in the past year as well, when we had, I'm sure you all remember, the crash into April after immediately following that eclipse season. And then we had this V-shaped recovery just 1 month later into May, an absolutely wild swing. And it's effectively equidistant, highs to highs, from the crash pivot. So definitely keep that in mind regarding where we're at right now, kind of still holding this major trading, horizontal trading range. Also, we had XRP making a run into July. And then the following month, the same for Ethereum in August, and then the same for Binance coin, BNB, in September, the following month after that. So that's something interesting to keep in mind as well. Kind of that like weird rotation effect that we had during the year of 2025 for some of the larger cap alts. But the truth is, we didn't have the typical euphoric alt season like we had in previous cycles. And for the past 3, now going on 4 years, we've had Bitcoin dominance holding up all the while. We've had the stock market and recently precious metals venturing deeper into price discovery and are clearly in euphoria with extreme greed sentiment without a doubt. And that has occurred while Bitcoin and the crypto market have been in the complete polar opposite sentiment and extreme fear. That doesn't mean that I think silver is overvalued or gold is overvalued. It's just they're due for a cool down phase. That would be best actually for precious metals. I already shared my thoughts. Gold, I'm expecting 4,700 to complete that 4/7 code ritual. And I already told you in the last red pill that I'm expecting silver to be bullish for the next couple of years leading into the next Shemitah year. So some people got it confused in my last red pill. I'm not sure why, but I'm very bullish still on all of that stuff, mostly because of where we're at in the 7-year cycle. That's another thing. So, but let's stay on track here. What has occurred for Bitcoin in the crypto market has been the polar opposite from what we've seen in precious metals lately. So the fact that we know fresh money is coming in and all past alt seasons were triggered by liquidity and not the 4-year cycle. This is why I'm actually optimistic for the structure of the crypto market as we speak, considering how things went in 2025 and how they're projected to go here in 2026. And just look at the recent yearly close for Bitcoin. Let's tap into that. I don't know if you could see, but right there was the total for the 12-month candle for the yearly candle close. We only were down 6%. Okay, so this is a first for Bitcoin. This effectively breaks the 4-year cycle pattern. And that wouldn't be the first major pattern Bitcoin broke recently, because we also had Bitcoin hit a new all-time high right before the block rewards halving this cycle as well. And we already mentioned no clear alt season this cycle either so far. All the while, we had silver finally breaking into price discovery for the first time in almost half a century. So again, this is a new environment, and we could top this all off with the AI cherry on top of the artificial Aquarian Sunday. We have yet another layer to add to all of this because of AI and because of humanoid robots. So I won't go any further. I'm sure you can get my point where I'm going with this. And with All of that being said, when we factor in the eclipses into this equation, which we spent a lot of time talking about, that's why this year is so special, especially considering how 2025 turned out. And I'll, of course, continue to keep you all updated every step of the way. But for now, let's pivot over to these charts a little bit more focused. And we have a lot of them to cover. And we'll start off this recap with exactly what scenario number 2 is, because some of you might be, of course, wondering. So let's go to the regular daily candles. Bitcoin continuing its breakout. This is, you gotta love it, man. Absolutely hilarious, this market. Anyways, I'm sure everyone's getting very, very bullish right now too, by the way, because that's also how things like to get out of the blue. But anyways, scenario number 2. What is scenario number 2? Scenario number 2 is a relief rally, minimum 100K or 115K on the higher end, followed by a rejection where everyone would start calling for a dead cat bounce. But when Bitcoin starts to correct, it would actually only correct back to the zone that we've recently been getting rejected at, essentially around where we're trading at right now. So call it like 88K to 91K. And that would actually flip as a support, and we would recover and push higher from there, catching all the bears off guard, and everyone who expected a typical dead cat bounce would be wrong. So let me just quickly show you the setup there, like draw it out. That. While the dead cat bounce would be something like this. It would be like a less, probably getting rejected somewhere there. I'm not sure why my marker tool is acting, so maybe the brush tool is better. Anyways, who cares? This is effectively the dead cat bounce scenario that most people would be expecting. And one of the ways that you could determine the price targets here, if you wanted the more extreme pull, is you would pull this fib in reverse from your pivot low to your pivot high, and you're sitting somewhere around 60K, which that would be a technical pullback zone for sure. We have this major trend line. You could only see 2 trend lines on this entire chart. One of them shows you the resistance that we had for the previous bull market and then where we got rejected in 2024, followed by this consolidation range, which we broke out of, back tested, and have recently back tested again. There's only 2 trend lines. The second one shows you where we first got rejected at the start of this euphoric phase in 2021 in the last cycle, where we broke down below, but then had this final quote unquote double top structure. And then when we broke below it, we clearly started treating it as resistance, because then we went into the official bear market. But in recovery, we did retest it, bounced, and we haven't seen it since. So if there were to be like a bear market, I don't want to say the overall target, but one of the next major downside targets, it would be around the low 60s. That is not my base case, okay? Because my base case is scenario number 2, the thing that we're focusing on now. So as I said, but I'm just showing you how to effectively grab that lower target. Scenario number 2 would be more this. Be a move, maybe 110, and then we would come back to where we are now. Don't worry about the timing so much, but that right there. Now this would also kind of, you could consider this move over here similar. I believe the correction phase that we've had from this local top down to this bottom is also probably quite similar when you measure from here down to here. But that's besides the point. The thing is that this move right here is very elusive, and what would be even more messed up is the new all-time high. That would destroy people. So, and then if it mimicked this exact thing. Now, I don't think we're going to have this again. I am, at this time, not a believer that we're going to have some crazy sub 50K Bitcoin, just not right now. Again, I will probably be, maybe I will be wrong. I'm maybe 80% chance I'm wrong. But something in me always leans more towards the eclipses, and the next eclipse is just way too fucking soon to see Bitcoin crater to 50K or lower. I know it's really funny though. I think what was it, Bitcoin's Twitter official X account, it like shared a tweet showing I think 47K, and that 47 number is so important. A part of me would love to entertain that, but like I just don't see Bitcoin continuing the same bear market uh, style that it always used to do. And also, by the way, just to say it, if Bitcoin were to only come back to 47K, that would still be a insane difference between the past bear markets, where we're like, I think the last one was 77,000 or 77%, excuse me. And the one before it was like 85%. And the one before that was like an 88% correction. So that would still be not nearly as messed up. But of course, what would that do on altcoins? That's another conversation. Still, it's not my base case right now. It's not my base case unless we have a alt season. If we see Bitcoin have just a major move to the upside, and I know this sounds biased, but this is why I could be vulnerable and say I will be wrong, likely. But if we were to have a major move to like 150K and end an alt season, then sure, why not 40K? Who cares? But that's the way that they really initiate. This shit that we've been doing lately, although very bullish, it's not nearly the usual Bitcoin that we're all, and the same case for alts. But what did we recently see happen in silver? Silver moving like an altcoin, or moving like the way Bitcoin moved over here. So there's something to be said for that. And by the way, I'll have a really special red pill next week because I want to talk a little bit more about the similarities in structure between where silver's at, gold, and Bitcoin and XRP. So maybe some of you could remind me next week. I'll cover that. I think it'll be really fascinating, but I want to stay on track here. Ultimately, scenario number 2 is this. But something we can also entertain that would be the absolute like disaster thing to occur in scenario number 2. So we're still entertaining this overall structure, but it would be really disastrous for leverage traders. So let me share where I'm at with this. Is that if we go up to 100, 115K, but then we come back to 80K for a double bottom, or an even more diabolical move would be us correcting back to the lows of the April crash into like the 70K zone. But instead of continuing further to the downside into that like next leg of the bear market into 60K and so on, instead Bitcoin would actually find support in those lows. And then it would be bought back up fast and rally all the way back up to 100K again to an even all-time high. And then all the popular expectations for Bitcoin at this time here in 2026 would be wrong. So we can consider scenario number 2 is like the max pain outcome in that weird frame. So the reason why I say that is where if you expected Bitcoin to just keep falling lower in the immediate short term, you'd be wrong. And simultaneously expecting Bitcoin to just rage to a new all-time high in the immediate short term would also be wrong, with the relief rally rejection and subsequent pullback, which most people are expecting right now. Then, of course, all the dead cat bounce people would be wrong. If Bitcoin only came back to 75K, they would all think they're right, but then that buyback would invalidate it. And then all the Bitcoin can't go to a new all-time high people would also be wrong. And in both directions, most leverage traders would get liquidated in quite a painful way because it wouldn't be any sudden moves necessarily, as this whole play, and listen carefully, and please don't get discouraged by this, but this whole play that I'm talking about right now could take this entire calendar year of 2026. And if that worries you, and if you're feeling impatient, just take a moment to consider what could happen to altcoins given Bitcoin dominance starts rotating at any point in this move. That's all that actually matters. Most of you do not give a shit what Bitcoin does. So, even a repeat of what happened in Q4 2024 for the altcoins, this move over here, even a repeat of that with a kind of short-lived rotation, that would actually be amazing to have occur, especially with how bearish the sentiment is lately in crypto. So this is what I'm personally looking out for here in 2026. The textbook Bitcoin relief rally along with at least a momentary rotation into the alts like we saw at the end of Q4 2024, for example. And you'll see many altcoins that we cover here are going to show this structure. But now that we've covered what I'm expecting next for Bitcoin, that sets the tone for the rest of our analysis here in today's Red Pill. And before we get into the altcoin charts, let me just quickly do some traditional TA on Bitcoin to ensure we have a clear overview of the setup at the start of this year. 2026. So what we just talked about here, scenario number 2, that's a theory. That's my expectation. But we need to do some regular TA to see what's up. So we just had Bitcoin close a monthly candle. This to me is like, if we were to close a bullish engulfing candle, that's a reversal structure. Can't argue that. We have a higher low on the monthly closes. Nothing to worry about in my opinion. Bi-monthly, also holding structure. Quarterly, holding structure. Quarterly, excuse me. Nothing wrong here. Okay, 12-month candle. This is a very fascinating candle to see because usually we're getting a red month that is 50+%. You could see over here, this is 64, this is 73, and this is 56. And a lot of people now might be expecting that that's the red candle we get this year because of the pattern that Bitcoin's barely completed, which is 3 greens and a red. 3 greens and a red. We just had technically the completion of those 3 greens, but then into the end of the year, we got our pullback. So Bitcoin has ended the year with a first, and we already talked about that, so we're not going to waste our time. Let's look at the weekly, and I want to see where some of our major moving averages are. So we, although have a wolf cross to the downside where the 8 is below the 55, we can see Bitcoin has finally gotten above the 8 simple moving average again. That's very nice to see. And we've also seen this before where we recover towards the 55 simple moving average on the weekly. That's around $101,000. So please keep an eye on that because that would, of course, be what a lot of technical analysts would be expecting. A lot of people were talking about the break below the 55, and then they'll start talking about Bitcoin recovering to the 55 soon. The thing is that Bitcoin has done that every single bear market. It gets rejected off of the 55 on a relief rally. So that's key because Bitcoin is in that mode right now where a lot of people are like, okay, well, we have liquidity coming in. And then a lot of people are still sticking to like, well, Bitcoin's done this every time. But Bitcoin's clearly not been doing things in the same patterns this current cycle compared to the prior cycles. Yes, we did get a new all-time high 4 years later, but remember, a lot of people weren't calling this really a new all-time high, and many people were basing their entire thesis on 2023 and moving forward off of this being the all-time high in March, April. Because that's when Bitcoin that's when the entire market was euphoric. So again, that would be like comparing it to the end of 2024, not the end of 2025, because that was the last time things were euphoric in crypto. Obviously, Q4 2025 was insanely bearish. So polar opposite. So this is one, of course, major thing to look out for. But in the meantime, this is also problematic. We have the EMA band flipping bearish where we have the 34 below the 21 now and also below the 13 EMA. So one thing to consider is that if we recover this along with recovering the 55 simple moving average, Bitcoin would also be doing a first, which of course would be great to see. And because everybody's looking at the TA, the people who are into it, that's why I'm expecting Bitcoin to confuse people and shock people as it has this entire cycle. So from a technical perspective though, if Bitcoin pushing up to 100K pushes up all the altcoins a lot, it would be irresponsible to not de-risk if you are somebody who needs the money. So please listen very, very closely to what I'm saying right now. And don't come back at me in 3 months and be like, why didn't you tell me to sell, Waters? Because that's not my fucking job, okay? What I'm telling you right now is if we get a relief rally to these technical levels and we see altcoins push up with it, you have to make the decision based on your portfolio to de-risk. Don't say that I didn't tell you, okay? This has been my message the entire cycle. All right. So with that being said, we're going to now look at all these other altcoins, and we want to consider that if you're those people that truly believe that we're going to go into the same bear market that Bitcoin always does, that the crypto market always does, then you need to do what's right for you. You must, okay? I right now am feeling that everybody is so bearish, and maybe that's like me being naive and me not being as sophisticated as I could have been in the past. I don't know, but like I just feel sentiment rules this market, especially crypto, more than anything else. We were just like insanely fucking bearish. So that's the way things go, man. It's always like that in crypto where things are ultra 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 bearish, and then suddenly we just go up in a straight line. I've showed you this many times in the alts. This wouldn't be any different in my opinion. So Bitcoin dominance is still ranging, so I'm not going to waste too much time talking about that, but we're clearly building a range between 60% and around 58%. Naturally, we would want to see break below 58%, and then we would start to entertain a rotation, right? But for now, we've been pretty much ranging here since August, and that was when a lot of alts were actually quite bullish on this major drawdown since we've been holding. So this feels like not only is Bitcoin more at a fair value, but the entire altcoin market is learning what it is now. It's no longer this pump fun meme coin bullshit, just like at the end of 2021 into 2022. All the NFT stuff got like rugged. So we're now in that moment where things are scary, things are uncertain, and the market will figure out like what it is. So when certain altcoins look really, really bad right now, they're looking bad because there's no community behind them, there's no true support behind them. They were a cultural moment, and the cultural moment is over. And it feels like since Trump's inauguration and the launch of Trump token, that was it. That was the moment where clearly a lot of the very speculative projects got pulled. So, I mean, that's you can't deny that now. Let's quickly look at Ethereum. I don't want to spend too much time on Ethereum just because there's more exciting things to talk about, but I don't mean that as throwing shade at ETH. It's more to be like, well, we have like 20 other alts to look at. So, with this current move that we're getting, I've also mentioned this many times, the inverse head and shoulders play. And the timing that it took for us to complete this shoulder, it was about 90 days. So I'm not sure where would be the perfect point to measure, but I sort of feel like it's this move right over there. And this means that we could have some time right until the end of this month, start of February. And then that could be when we repeat that move right there. Although we could effectively be in the start of that move. And it doesn't need to be the repeat of time. That's irrelevant. It's more on eclipses and other energetics. I think we also have a Mercury retrograde coming up, which we'll cover in the future. But for now, just take that into consideration. This is a inverse head and shoulders pattern. Ethereum has been holding structure this whole bull run. Even the shit that it did back at the Black Swan event into the tariff crash in April, it didn't break structure. And we're just pushing up against a major resistance of the prior peaks in the last all-time high, coming down and holding a higher low structure. If you were to just disregard this Black Swan event or this V-shaped recovery, that's good. Higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low. It's holding structure. So I'll leave it at that because the specifics on ETH aren't as sexy as everything else that's happening, obviously. Let's look at XRP. XRP is starting to officially break a very arduous resistance that we've been dealing with for about 90 days. I made a post about this recently, measured off of that top. Let me turn off the moving averages. Let's double check the mic. We're good. So yeah, that move right there in October over to where we are now, it's effectively 3 full months, and we just got rejected, 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 rejected. Here it got very clear that it was being suppressed. And then we have the official breakout candle last Friday. And then following this breakout candle is just subsequent greens. This structure could potentially be this event that happened over here. So I want to be cautious because again, this was almost 90 days or so. I mean, if we were to take from around the top to the completion of that move, say 93 days, who cares? We didn't really do something so spectacular at the initial part of the breakout, but I'm sure it felt good to see XRP go from $1.60 up to 260. Gaining a whole dollar is not problematic, but it was a fake out and we came back down. So we need to see, how does XRP react to this? Does it get the major rotation that it did like back in Q4 2024? Or is it something that it floods initially into like ETH and ERC20, and then it takes a little bit of time for it to become noticeable in XRP like it did over here, where the real energy of this move kicked off? And this takes about 4 weeks. And I've taught you guys this. You could see it takes about 28 days for the major bullish move to be complete in XRP. Same thing here. It's right around 4 weeks. So when these 4 weeks kick off, this shit can go fast. And if that's the case on this candle over here, then we can be looking at the end of the month. We could literally be back at 270, 280 at the end of the month, maybe even pushing back to $3. I think if XRP moves back to $3, I don't know what could really be slowing it down from breaking into price discovery, in my opinion, especially if we see silver cool off. So that's just my take on things, but I very much feel like there's a relationship between the XRP chart and the silver chart, and I'll get more into that next week, as I mentioned. But for now, this is a very good development. This looks great. Let's move into, we already covered Bitcoin dominance. I am not going to be talking about silver and gold because we already talked about it last week a lot. We are now looking at render, and I just want to quickly recap render, and the reason being is because I talked about this in last week's Red Pill, and I was mentioning this break over here, the spring, and how we could be in the spring for render, and that's actually making me want to do a venture capital investment on render. So I didn't really build any position. I mean, I'm glad I didn't, because this thing's been trending down since Q1 of 2024, and we're here moving into Q1 of 2026. But with that being said, this is inevitably going to break this 870 zone, and it's come up to that zone 3 times. This higher low over here was problematic, and then once it made the lower low over here, that was a sign to GTFO. But I really like this structure that I'm seeing, and if this Wyckoff chart were to play out again, this shows me that it could be pushing up to this SOS phase in this calendar year. So I feel like render, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I already covered it last week. Go watch last week's Red Pill. But this is like a notable, like honorable mention, shout out to render. This doesn't look bad to me. And there's going to be a couple projects today that I don't personally own, but I will be just kind of giving these honorable mentions to say that, like, I think this is a decent venture capital opportunity. So not anything extreme, not 50% of your portfolio, but a small little sliver of the portfolio can go a long way. So let's skip over to XLM, Stellar Lumens. All right, so what we are seeing right now is really fascinating with XLM, because we also had a notable sell-off over here into the end of 2020, and a lot of altcoins sold off into the end of 2020. And why that matters is because what also happened in 2020 was a major crash due to a narrative called the C19 scam. You remember the global lockdowns that we had. This was a V-shaped recovery, and then we actually pushed back to the prior highs before dealing with a bit of a correction. And although this correction is coming in after we were already bullish, the difference is we already made it through the golden pocket back in the end of 2024. So this isn't me saying that it's a absolute identical repeat of the structure. It's clearly not. But what I am pointing out is how 2020 has a relationship with 2025. And I'll quickly run through that so we don't need to for the rest of today's Red Pill. But 2020, we had the end of Trump's first term, his final year as president. We get an event that crashes the markets into March. Then he is now taking on the presidency again for his second term, and we had a crash in March. into April. So that right there is showing that there's a mirroring effect. And if we were to have a couple of other things that we focused on that occurred in the year of 2025, I would say that we're very similar in the stock market chart, in the Russell chart specifically as well. And obviously, precious metals are experiencing their own thing, but we were also bullish in precious metals in the V-shaped recovery after the C19 crashes too. So that wasn't actually different. But what was clearly different this time is we had price discovery for precious metals. So it's great to be a precious metals investor. But point that I'm making here is this sell-off into the end of 2020 is reminiscent of the sell-off into perfectly the end of 2026 or 2025, excuse me. And then look at the pivot when we zoom in. Dude, it was like right on January 3rd, we just started fucking raging. And funny enough, this is January 6th candle back in 2021, and today is 2026, January 4th. So I'm not saying it's going to go perfectly the same way, but look at how oversold we've been recently. I mean, let's go to the weekly chart. We had RSI digging down into the low 30s. I mean, damn, like that's kind of like no different than the last bear market, you know? Like when you get below 40 on RSI on the weekly chart, that's typically a sign to expect a little bit of a relief rally. So we had the C19 crash over here around 30. We recovered, and then we had again pretty much chop until retests of the prior highs. So I think lately we've just been stuck in this massive trading range for stellar lumens between 20 cents to 47 cents. And that to me is this triple top, we could call it a triple top, will move into price discovery. Obviously, it'd be amazing if it happens this year. But it's hard to entertain that this run is completely over, especially if we are to pivot at this level, which is the same, effectively the same price that we came down to during the tariff crash. That I like to see. So again, though, you can see a buyback and then it has this W effect. And then one single week on Stellar Lumens was 87% gains. That's the kind of shit that could happen very soon. But we have to see how Bitcoin reacts to this next new moon, in my opinion, if I had to be like, give you guys something to look out for. So I'm not going to take as much time for the rest of our altcoins because I've already kind of set the tone for everything else, but keep some of these things in mind. This chart doesn't look so messed up to me, but there's a very, very clear resistance around 50 cents that we need to break, and right now we're holding support. We're going to move on to H-bar, Hedera. So I have a little bit of a fractal over here, and the idea behind this fractal was a repeat of the structure and how it does show us going up into February, which I already showed you of Bitcoin, and then this rejection down through the next eclipse season. That is also not weird because remember, over here, we had eclipse season and it took us a couple weeks following for us to bottom. Not weird. So in the event that we are to have a bullish move, it would make more sense that it happens sooner than later, just because we've been bearish for weeks now, for months. So the full-blown release, as I said, it could be something that has more to do with August, but we'll circle back to that when we're a little bit more confident. For right now, we need to take things one step at a time because these relief rallies, they could be sudden. And as I told you, if they are to be sudden, you're going to need to know to execute some profits just to de-risk, you know? I can sense right now a lot of people are having some money problems and it's getting the best of them emotionally, and that's where relief rallies you must, well, I don't want to say this like you must, but like you need to take them seriously, you know, because nobody knows 100% what's going to happen. I definitely don't, but I do know what to do when I need to do something. That's the difference. So if I was really, really in that situation where I wasn't confident, of course I would de-risk. I've done it plenty of times. This cycle, I'm just doing my best to not get caught up in narratives. And it seems like there's been so many since Trump's selection victory. And that is, for me, a big distraction. And it's only been a distraction this whole cycle. Obviously, since the launch of his token, we can see what the prices have done, especially in his token, which I think we shared last week. And wow, what a scam that was, you know? So we need to be careful right now because there's so many awesome investments that we're holding on to, stuff that will do very, very well in the next alt season. And people are getting shaken out of this stuff just because, you know? So I'm not. In my opinion, I signed up for this war. Like, I'm here to battle. And I feel very confident with my stellar lumens and my H bar position. So this isn't exactly the play, but it's giving you an idea of how this structure can play out. And also, look at the start of 2021, how we just raged to the upside all the way until March. Funny enough, we do have March, April being a crash last year. That wouldn't be weird if we did the reverse for this year. Like, just absolutely the opposite of the prior year. It'd be pretty funny. Like, I think the eclipses are perfectly postured to make that a huge possibility actually. So let's keep moving. We have Solana. That was actually the thing that I wanted to point out with Solana right over here. So if you take on Sol from it topping in August, over here you see it's early September. It's not much of a difference, and then we sold off all the way until Christmas, which we also just pivoted on the same week so far. Like, if I was to turn all this off, you'll see what I mean. And you know what's so crazy about this is that's the solstice. So the week of the solstice, we have Solana pivoting. Funny enough. And then by February, we were breaking out into price discovery. This was a very extreme move. This is not my expectation. This is unbelievable, the rotation into Solana. But I do want you to look at, like, when you zoom out, you're like, wow, this held structure since the end of Q1 2024, man. That's a fucking milestone for the fact that this had a 95% bigger than almost 97% correction. This is a milestone. So all the bullshit that was happening with the pump fund stuff and the Trump meme coin and that, it's like, I don't want to give up my bullish long-term outlook, and I get kind of reaffirmed when I look at charts like this. And I don't even care so much about Solana. This is not a big position for me, but this is my way of being like, ooh, we have a little bit of a compass here, like along with ETH, along with XRP, in my opinion, along with what we're seeing in the USDT dominance chart, which maybe we'll talk about more next week, and also with precious metals and where the stock market was at the end of 2020 into 2021 after the C19 crash. So this is very fascinating how we had this major correction and then this perfect pivot after the new year. It's feeling like it's taking place, or starting to at least. Now we're going into Doge, and Doge is admittedly one of my biggest venture capital. It's probably one of my biggest investments that I gambled on this. Sorry, I didn't change the chart. It's one of my biggest investments that I gambled on for this particular cycle. And so far it has been, I don't want to say the most disappointing, but it's good enough and not horrible for me to feel like, oh, it's a big problem and I need to like give up on this position and sell and get out. No, not at all. I think though that we got a little memed out at the end of 2024. And that's what looking back, I should have been more focused on sentiment, which now I am. I should have been more focused on sentiment. I should ask myself, well, this is kind of weird how this is the most me that we've been since back here. And of course, in this cycle, it was all about Elon, and this cycle, it's all about Trump. But they're both hand in hand because we started off this cycle with the Doge Elon thing where they were laying off all these government workers. And what was this shit called? The Department of Gay, I don't even know what energy, whatever, who cares? I'm joking. But the point is that there is a ritual at play here where instead of Elon, it was Trump this time. And it's just been perpetually bearish after Elon went on SNL, and it was just perpetually bearish after Trump meme coin launched, right? So meme coins have effectively been taking a shit this whole time, and I feel like memes aren't over. Memes are still a big part of the like cultural phenomenon and the cultural movements, but they're changing, like I think we have to adapt. And that's why I don't feel so awful about this particular investment. And I know Doge, although it could be boring, it could have some explosive moves. And this happened before where we had a major move up, and then this crash that followed was 80% before the true blow off top. And what we've recently seen was also almost an 80% correction, if you consider the scam wick that happened on October 10th. Excuse me. Let me take a quick sip of water. So, this run up followed by an 80% correction is not weird. The thing is when does this bullish energy initiate? Well, that's what has been very difficult to tell. So I am sticking to my Doge position at this time. I do feel like we just came back to test a incredibly important level with your blow off top of the last cycle, the automatic rally rejection, and then after we had the next, like, I would call this an SOS, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect for an altcoin, but hear me out. This trend line has been back tested multiple times. We swiped through it in a liquidation event, and recently I feel like we've gotten close enough to confirm that this has been flipped into a support. Now, again, it's downsloping, so that doesn't make me happy because it could downslope all the way to fucking 8 cents, right? But the timing of things I feel is important, because if you look at this blow off top and then you go to this candle right here, 406 days. Well, let's say here, okay? Like, it's not going to be perfect. Bruh, this is fucking close. So if you look at the timing of how long it took ETH to correct to a bottom, which was in June 2022, same as Doge, we're mimicking that. So from the last time we had euphoria, 406 days later, we're landing at a bottoming structure. Now, does that mean go bet the whole farm on Doge? Definitely not. I over invested in Doge, and I'll admit that, but I don't think I'm in a big enough loss to really be worried. And if it were to come back up to, and I don't even remember my entry. I'm actually probably in profits when I think about it. So I might be overthinking at this time. I just don't remember because I have so many different altcoins. And ultimately, my plan is sell on any euphoria coming up, because regardless if we push into price discovery or not, as I said earlier, I feel like it would be irresponsible to not de-risk a little bit in euphoria. I'm going to be following that advice too. So would I love to have just a crazy alt season go to Valhalla? Well, of course, if we were to mimic 2021, that would actually come sooner than later, and that would be epic. But it's hard for me to be like, yeah, sure, that's definitely going to happen. Although that would be what I would want to happen. Good thing is I'm positioned in enough of these alts to, if it were to be the case, that's fine. And regarding me being positioned enough in these alts, I don't think we have much more down to experience. The only thing is look at this. This could be quite a bit of sideways after that whole moment. So again, that's why I'm cautious, and I'm with my caution. I want you to look at this relationship that Doge has. It's about 400 right there, 400 days, and then we have a relief rally. And off of that relief rally, the shit went up 150%. So that would be like us coming back into around the 702 fib, maybe 40 cents again. And that's a great play for me. If we're not going to have an alt season and we're just going to have this perpetual weird sideways all the way until 2027, like for me, totally fine. Profit is profit. And alt profit is crazy. Alt profit is way crazier than anything else. So in the event that we were to even make it back to this 40 cent region or whatever, that's 200% up. That's pretty damn good. I mean, now this isn't throwing any shade at silver, but yeah, like if you bought the this crash that happened into the tariffs, which I think most of you, if you got into silver, you're probably below 20. Yeah, so you would have had to buy the absolute lows on silver following the C19 crash in order to have the similar uh, And again, Doge is a million times easier. Any altcoin is I'm not even going to isolate Doge. Any altcoin's easier to sell. So, and the moves are quicker. And one is bearish as shit right now, while the other one's in peak euphoria and looks like a parabolic blow off top. So, do with that what you will. One thing that's very weird though is we haven't hit the 1618 on Doge, which we always have. So this is why, again, I'm like, I think this cycle's different, man. I think this cycle's different, and it could be that extension into the Q1 2027, which sounds insane. But with that being said, though, that means there would be a de-risking phase in the midst of that, and I do think obviously this is the year for that. So there's nothing wrong with taking some profits in the middle of this, holding off, reassessing what your ideal portfolio could be, and then implementing strategy to then ride out the rest of the year. I mean, we saw that be the case back in 2024 when we had a major run up, and then a lot of alts had a huge 50, 60, 70, 80% correction, some of them, before one final pivot up. Let's go on to Aerodrome. This is one recently that had a big slide, but still, like when we zoom out, we're just in a major horizontal trading range that's been in place since Q4 the 2024. Also, inverse head and shoulders potential with a swipe down to the 236 fib. I like that. And this major sell-off that fit in this parallel channel, to me, it feels like it was just an orchestrated sell-off, and I think there's something similar that we just experienced. So if I was to take from this top to this pivot, it's about 119 days, funny enough. Ooh, 130, so it's even a little bit longer, but that is interesting. That is interesting. And off of this pivot, it went up 400. Oof, my God. So yeah, this would be a de-risking zone, obviously around $1.50. Keep that in mind if you're somebody who feels like you're stuck in Aerodrome, but I don't. I feel like I understand where this is going, so I'm fine with the outlook on Base, Coinbase, everything that's going on over there in that world. And then also, when you have a sell-off that's lasting 130 days, that's pretty long time, man. I don't know how much longer they can keep that up. You know, over here it was about 147, still major rally, 350%. I bet it was similar over here, a little bit more, 450%. That's kind of the expectation in my opinion right now. And look at how oversold, like we got it 35 RSI in the weekly. Fuck, man. That's good. That's a good level. So yeah, let me see. I think yeah, like getting above 70 cents should do the trick, but probably 80. I want to say it's 80. That really is more crucial. So about 80%, then we could have a quick rally up to $1.30, $1.40 on the upper end. That's a really nice play. Let's get over to Filecoin. This is a crazy position of mine. So this one tanked, you know, horrible correction when it finally broke through support. So we had the support going back all the way here, February 2019, one more test into the C19 crash, and it tried to hold, and then it just sunk. So I don't remember where I'm at in my exposure to this particular project. That is a VC play, so it's maybe like 1.52% of my portfolio. I'm not sure. It's nothing like catastrophic, but with it breaking down, this is fascinating now that, and again, I'm not by no means telling anyone to invest in this, but from where it is right now, just coming up to this 382, which we have proof is a strong level with a rejection here, and here, stretched out from 2022 all the way to the end of 2024, that makes $7 or $8 a key level, and that's an awesome play for where we're at, all things considered. So what this looks like and feels like to me is a spring in Wyckoff, where you have like your selling climax, then you have your automatic rally, but then you can't break any higher, and you effectively break your support. And that spring effect feels very noticeable with the October 10th crash, but then also the way that we've been manipulating, or the price has been like all over the place since, you know. So I would not invest in this, to be 100% honest. I would avoid this at all costs. But if you're somebody who's holding it, de-risking opportunities are absolutely ahead. And I don't really feel at this in the immediate short term that this will go lower than the current price. Although it is normal to fill these wicks, this wasn't a very special event. This is a one-off. It's not normal. And also funny enough, we had the opposite happen in 2020 in October. You see a major move up, and then we have this major move down in October this year. So the release, yeah, it started after the new year, and we went up 1,000% into March. So yeah, I would keep that in mind. This level of $8 on Filecoin. Going over to reserve rights. This is also a position that I'm still holding. Also, not the best performer right now. It's broken down and it's right around supports, which is nice to see that it's holding support, unlike Filecoin, which got much lower than the supports. But this sell-off has been going on for long enough. And where this pivoted, sorry, one second. I had to carry a fractal from another chart that was like on CoinTrader Pro or something. And it's not even registering. Yeah, that's annoying. But anyways, working with what we have here, there was a clear support from the October eclipse season over to the September eclipse season. And then once we pivoted, we broke down. And this is sort of the inevitable of a macro horizontal trading range where you have a clear automatic rally. This was your selling climax. And now you need to make that like, what are you going to do next? And I'll show you what I mean by that. Over here, we have XRP, which already did this same stuff. So XRP had a top in 2018, as you're all aware, the end of the start of 2018, and then it had a major correction. There's your top, major correction. And then when it had its bull run in 2021, it wasn't into price discovery. It was a lower high. So we only came up to like $1.80 and then we got rejected and we came back down. But when you look at where we came back down to, I would say it's more fair to like not go the whole C19 crash, but let's just say around the 236. Well, we have, of course, now made it back to double bottom territory, but not breaking structure. And then we know we have this being around where it launched. It gives confidence that these are sort of repeating patterns. And we also had Dogecoin and XRP have similar cycles, but not in the same cycle. So you have the 2014 cycle, you have the 2017 cycle over here, where if you look at what XRP did from 2016 into the end of 2017, that was effectively, I'll show you real quick so I don't confuse you guys. But this move right here, the double peak cycle, Doge did this in the last cycle, the double peak, but it was not the same cycle that it happened in. Same with, we have price discovery for Doge, but we didn't have price discovery for XRP in this last cycle. And now we're pushing back up to this top zone here, and we've held it as a support. So that's a very positive thing to see. Now, coming back to this, that would mean, in my opinion, the next major move is back into this 888 fib. So if we were to get that for RSR, that'd be legend. That'd be crazy. Now, will it happen in this year? That's very tough to say because there's a lot of resistance right here at around 1 cent. So from here to a cent is still a crazy move. It's 300%. You'd want to be careful there because with that recovery, it could chop. And then the next major move up to the golden pocket or the 888 could take a little bit more time. So you want to consider that this is the highest we've gotten, 2 to 3 cents in the end of 2024. And we've now been selling off since. So it's corrected long enough in my opinion, but I would be careful here because you don't want this where we buy back and then we get a rejection and come back lower. even if it's just to build a base around this level here. Fully fill in this wick and retest liquidity that we've already experienced in the past. So that's why I'm putting a lot more emphasis lately on like de-risking, guys, because if you're in that position where you need to, then you should. Let's move on to Jasmy. All right, this is a wild chart. We have the Jasmy chart topping out back in Q4 of 2024 as well. Here we are over a year later. And we've now back tested a key level that once we got above, let me show you. This is funny to see actually, because this was a level that we were getting rejected on after the end of the bear market. Of course, it took a little bit more time, but we were getting rejected at this level 3 clear times over the course of a little over a year. And recently we've back tested it. And what's not surprising actually is filling in this zone, because there wasn't too much going on between over here, about a penny, and whatever this level is here. So that whole zone has been filled, and now we've officially come back to backtest an area of resistance, which was in play for 525 days before a definitive breakout. This whole thing right here has been officially filled, and we've completed that, in my opinion, recently, sans the scam wick over here. Now, what that means for recovery is this level right there around the 017 territory, that's going to be resistance, as it was flipped resistance in April and then also in August of last year. That recovery, not so epic, but thing is once you clear that level, you really don't have too much ahead for all the way up to 4 cents again. So from where we are now to 4 cents would be pretty awesome. That's about a 400% move, outperforming a lot of things. So this, again, venture capital, you want to have a small position in this. You don't want too much exposure. This stuff is not the most impressive until it goes up in a straight line. So just looking Jasmy's move over here, it was, I know it doesn't look like it. I know it doesn't look like it, guys, but this is 1000%. So if you bought the bear market, man, that's 1500%. Like, it's pretty fucking good. All right. And it could make moves. I mean, look at this. This was 3000% in 70 days. All right. This is when Bitcoin was heading up into its final peak in the cycle of 2021. So I'm not sure if I would be entertaining things higher than 5 cents right now at this time. But yeah, that was a level that we've yet to get over since back in 2022. It's been over 4 years. So this to me is an opportunity as well. And I'm not the biggest fan of, just getting into venture capital for the sake of it, but there's definitely some upside opportunity without even the necessity for it to retest significantly higher levels. Therefore, it's a more conservative play in that way. All right, we have Avalanche, AVAX. Wow, okay, this is wild. I believe we have a parallel channel here. Could quickly sort that out. Sure do. So we have this parallel channel here that is sunk through the 236 fib. Interestingly enough, that was a support level on that rejection, or that liquidation, sorry. These liquidations, and then effectively this October 10th thing, or October 6th, or whenever it happened, this really like fucked things up, right? But this now falling back to the bottom of this parallel channel, it kind of reminds me of render in a weird way. So let me delete this. This is irrelevant, and this is irrelevant. It's just taking up screen space. Now, $17 is big on Avalanche, and the thing here is when you have three perfectly stretched out rejections, that means that this is bound to break, and 3 clean back tests at the bottom. I wouldn't really call this like a bull flag because it's just super shallow and fucked up, but patterns don't matter. What matters most is, are we holding the horizontal trading range? Yes. Are we clearly showing signs that like, well, we can't dig much lower than where we've already gone? Yes. Have we broke below our macro structural support? No. So there's some good things here. Obviously, though, we do have a lower high rejection followed by lower lows. Point is, though, is three times a charm. So this to me feels like it's very close to pivot. And with where it's at right now, just keep in mind that for it to push back up to the last major rejection point, $34, is a 200% move. That's not too shabby. And for it to get the full move, or like the full recovery from the bear market, which is something we already did back in March of 2024, that right there is quite the move as well. So I would play conservative now, guys. Like, anticipating price discovery is probably a little bit more dangerous in this year of 2026. I would be more leaning towards like expect the elusive and don't get too confident. Okay, so XRP is definitely waking up. This is good to see. This market is really responding to New Year's. Like, it's obvious there was a lot of tax loss harvesting happening. Gonna look at Aave now. All right. Aave, very, very weird with this double, like, short term swipe up to the 786. But the fact that the April 7th crash happened in the midst of it, and then we have a higher low structure since the July 2020 or August 2023 timeframe is very bullish. So we have a high, lower high, lower high. Sorry, higher low. Apologies. We're at an hour and 25 minutes, so it's easy to make these mistakes, but at least I could catch myself. So we have higher lows and also clean rejection at the top of the 786. That's not weird. Very key structural level. I would also probably look to that being recaptured, especially if this market pivots bullish in the short term. So you're looking at about $350 for Aave, and this is an interesting product. This is one of the best performers in the last cycle. As of right now, this would not be something I'd personally add to my portfolio. I think out of all of these, the only one that I would really consider is the render play. Actually, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of XLM either. Obviously, a little bit more ROI than the XRP play, but still, XRP is core foundation of my portfolio. So that's not me talking down on it or anything. It's just regarding the ROI. But XRP could get very bullish very fast. We all know this. So not a whole lot to say specifically on this avalanche chart, but it is a very bullish chart, and it is like one of those plays that price discovery is not weird. It was one of the best performers in the last cycle. I mean, damn, it just went up in a straight line pretty much the whole time. And since entering this new cycle, it's held its bullish structure too. So to me, this is a play worth considering for those people that want to be on the more conservative side of things. Let's go over to, what is it? XDC network. Where are we at? Why can't I see it? Mamma mia. All right, very, very weird chart too, zigzagging all around, but holding structure. So we have our low back in December 2022. We have another pivot low around November 2024, and then we have another pivot low around December 2025 at the end of last year. So this project is just stair stepping up. I personally feel like XDC is an opportunity in the portfolio. Like, it's not something that I would disregard. It's something I would absolutely have a little bit of exposure to. Would I have as much of this as I have XLM or XRP? No. But if you treated XDC as a portion of your portfolio back in the last cycle, it was a smart choice. So this to me feels like it's finding its fair price, but not my favorite looking chart. I can't call it a horrible looking chart, but it's not my favorite. Also, probably very thin liquidity on this one too, so that's another thing to consider. But with it holding structure, you can't be upset. So this is the major trend line, the major diagonal trend line. And it's clear the relationship with this bear market break below, gravitated back to it, and then we've yet to get to it. So I would say that if this were to have another big move up, double top is a high possibility, somewhere around 19 to 20 cents, maybe even a little bit deeper to like really fake people out. But it's tough for me at this time to be entertaining higher than those prices just because of where we're at in this current cycle. So keep that in mind. Not a whole lot to say in particular, though, about this XDC chart that I haven't already kind of covered in other projects. Let's look at Algorand. This is definitely one that I would say I would be cautious with if you're somebody who's into these like quote unquote ISO projects, which there's really like no such thing as, but if you're like we all say it, XRP, XLM, HBAR, etc. If you're putting Algorand in that conversation, I would not. I would not put Algo in the same conversation as XLM, XRP, and HBAR personally. And the chart also backs that up. So this is one of those, like, I don't even remember what my entry is. It was so little, probably doesn't affect me too much, but I would be cautious on holding a lot of Algorand. This has not been performing that well, considering this was the C19 crash where Bitcoin was the like $4,000, $5,000. Okay. It's at the same price as it was during the C19 crash in the recovery phase. So this isn't very impressive. I would be cautious of entertaining this as a investment opportunity. I would rather just stay more focused on XRP, XLM, maybe even XDC would be, yeah, I would actually with confidence say I would rather choose XDC. But this was one of the projects that I had, I believe, some exposure to. So we're just giving it a quick mention for the sake of it. Now, we are going to quickly check out Say. This was one of those like venture capital positions that I've hinted at, and since I don't remember when I did, maybe in the last red pill, but since I've hinted at, it's actually broke down from this pattern. Now, this isn't anything clean and nothing to be really putting too much prana into, but the fact that this broke down and the measure move is like right to this wick is solid. And I think the fact that we came back to test all the way down to the bottom, this is a double bottom for me. So we have the double bottom with this liquidation ritual flash crash, and then also we're filling out this zone, meaning a kickback is very possible. And what the kickback would be is a return towards the apex of the pattern of this particular, just a massive triangle, which again, not something that I'd be like trading, but clearly once we broke that support, it started to cascade all the way back to a very important level. So that apex would be naturally sitting somewhere around 28 cents, around between this 382 and the 0.5 fib. And then consider that we had a bunch of rejections over here, literally at this 0.5 fib level, you can now see is 33 cents. So with this recovery back to 33 cents, that's not so bad, but nothing to be, super excited about. So I would even say that this is kind of more like the Doge play in that way, where the ROI is similar, the chart performance and in general, not so different when you look at the recovery opportunity. So this is one of those plays that I've been considering just because some people that I've trusted in the space have a lot of, I'm not the research into the altcoins guy. So whenever I have people that I'm following, people that are kind of, I don't want to say trusted in the space. I actually don't really follow him, but let's just say people that reach out to me, people that are either in the community or they are really into the work that I use, and maybe they use some of it for their own benefit. They share their thoughts, and Say keeps coming up, and another one that keeps coming up we'll get to in a little bit. It's virtuals, and then also I think Tau was brought up a lot, and then Sui a lot. So my inner circle tends to keep mentioning those. I would say it's for a reason. So this is just a quick honorable mention for Say. I'm not super sold on this being a huge opportunity, but there is some downside in this chart that it, to me, looks oversold and ready for a recovery phase. Now we're going to get through Chainlink really quickly. Let me see, where's Link? Oh, right under. Wow, it's been a while. The Link chart looks so similar actually to the Aave chart, funny enough. And they have that crazy breakout that they did both into the same time and end of Q1, start of Q2 in 2021. And we haven't had full price discovery yet, but we are holding structure that is without a doubt. Even this liquidation event where most projects got absolutely just demolished. Like, I mean, Link held. So what that means to me is Link is like a fair price. And it's not often I could say that, but I feel like Link trading around where it is a fair price, and it's holding perfectly on the 382 fib. It's confirmed that is a very, very strong support, and our structure is pointing up. So I actually like this play. I think I know enough about Chainlink to know its involvement in the future Aquarian economy as an oracle and ties to Microsoft, etc. Do your own research, but this right here is like once Bitcoin has a full rotation or starts to initiate a rotation, I think this is going to do really well, at least getting back to that $30 range where it previously got rejected at the end of 2024 and where it was getting a lot of resistance at the end of 2021 as well before the last bear market. So from where we are right now, it's not the most impressive move, but this is a little bit more quote unquote resilient to the bear markets. Like a lot of these altcoins can lose so much of their value and just go lower and lower and lower. Like look at Algorand, for example. You would have been much happier getting into Link. This is where the C19 crash was for Link. It is up 600% from the C19 crash, whilst Algorand is still trading at the same price as the C19 crash. That would be like seeing Chainlink at $2, by the way. So just take that into consideration. This is a play that I'd feel a little bit more confident in. Now we're going to go over quickly to VeChain. This is definitely one of those projects that did not do as well as I thought it would do. I thought this was going to do very well, but it just did not. And we can see this major correction at the end of 2020. We actually hit the same price. I'll change this line to like yellow so you can see. Launched, broke below, rejected, coming back up to it, C19 crash, broke above, back tested, and then rallied. Now, since we've had a completion of the bear market, this has actually gone lower, which to me is like a spring. So the spring in Wyckoff, where we had our structural support low right there. And I'm sorry, this looks very messy. It's a little cleaner. It's just, I haven't done like a full revamp yet. That's unnecessary to have. This is probably unnecessary to have. This is very necessary to have. And then here too. Let me just change that to like a dotted line. Okay. So effectively, once this crosses above this level, it could rapidly go to 3 cents. And from where we are now to that level, we're looking at about 153%, not too impressive. And back up to the outside of this parallel channel, which we were holding for the most part until mid this year, last year, that actually aligns with a level that would make sense if we were to have a quote unquote alt rotation in the short term. So nothing crazy. We've already reached those levels in the past. We have about 5 cents on VeChain. So that's not horrible. From today's prices, it's about 400%, but there's going to be stuff that shows up along the way that is much more riding the wave of like some sort of narrative, and it's a little bit more quote unquote modern and let's just say sexy. And this is not one of those plays. So I would not recommend this. I haven't recommended this all of last year. I don't even remember the last time I invested in this particular project, but what I have invested in, not necessarily recently, but is Vitho. This is like absolute degen speculative play. So this is by no means me saying that I'm a genius and I would recommend this. This was me like Hail Mary pass. I know that when this thing makes a move, it can make a move. So where we're also back at is like the same end of 2020. Just like with Solana, just like with a lot of things that I showed you. End of 2020. Pivot, and it would be insane if we were to pivot in the same way. Now, I'm not anticipating this. That's fucking crazy. 3 months it went up 3,500%. But we can see in a short amount of time, I mean, this is only about 4 months or so, 700%. So coming back to the same level, it's making me, I wouldn't put a new investment in this, but the fact that I have a position, I'm all good in the hood. I will hold this until we have another explosive move, and hopefully it won't just be something that lasts a single day, which is what this felt like. And looking back at it, I definitely wish I had my limit order set for this 702 fib or around the 702 fib. This is something I did in the last cycle with Zilliqa, and it triggered at the very end of the cycle, and I was able to get out of my Zilliqa play with an insane profit, and I didn't have it set up for Vito this cycle. So learn from my mistakes. Please, guys, follow the exit strategy blueprint. If you don't have it, it's available for any of you over on my website, watersabove.com. If you just get the blueprint alone, it's like the cheapest thing available on my website. It's insanely valuable because it teaches you not only the TA, but also how to do the gematria, the decoding alongside the TA. And then it also teaches you like just good principles to practice for knowing when to de-risk, knowing when to take profits, and how to set up your numbers. You know, that's really what's the most powerful piece to it all. So shout out to Vito, man. This is one of those that like I definitely will be getting rid of course, on any major jump up. It's already sold off quite a bit. For me, it's time for pretty much everything to have a relief rally. This is something I wouldn't mind parting ways with, obviously. So let's move on to Cardano. This is not one that I've invested in some time, at least not that I can remember, but I do believe I might have some exposure to it. This was actually one of my best plays in the last alt season. I did very, very well on Cardano. I'm glad that I got some exposure to Cardano and I didn't go full like ape in on XRP. I did very good on XRP too, but with Cardano, I definitely was able to balance out the fact that I didn't get as much ROI on XRP as I initially expected. And I believe the same for my Ethereum position. So Cardano helped, but since it has been sort of a bummer, but that's a lot of these OG projects that go back to the last cycle. But I can't be like so negative about it because it is holding structure. It's just in the same boat as many other altcoins. So I wouldn't isolate this and have something particularly negative to say. And then also remember what I was showing you before with the C19 crash and where we are compared to like, for example, the Algorand chart or the Filecoin chart or many other charts. Actually, this shit's up 800% from the like around the halfway point of recovery from the C19 crash. So if you bought the last cycle in Cardano and you've been holding, that's not a bad hold. Clearly not. So just keep that in mind. This has made progress. It's just we haven't had an alt season. You could tell, look at the pivot. Like once this does pivot effectively, it could go up dramatically in a short amount of time. I mean, even look over here. This was only like a month and it went up almost 300%. So yeah, I'd keep this in mind for anybody who's in Cardano right now. I've been hearing some people talk quite negatively about it as if it's like a dino coin. And guys, that's just the way of the world at this time. Like everything feels outdated because of the advent of artificial intelligence and all this stuff happening with agentic AI. And yeah, we're just in a new world, man. And it's rapidly developing. We didn't have that same tech in our hands back in 2020, 2021. So it was all eyes on the crypto market. Funny enough, virtuals is popping off right now. But let's quickly look at Theta and T-Fuel, because a lot of people are requesting that. I haven't looked at this chart in some time. And then we'll wrap up today's podcast. So Theta, oof, okay, yeah, same. It's just dragged all the way to the end of kind of like where we were in 2020. And this is happening to a lot of these projects, man. Very interesting. So we did come up to right there at the breaking point into the bear market a couple of times. And then this broke down and now it's all the way at 30 cents. That's insane. Just look at where it was in the C19 crash and where it is today. It's about 300% or so higher, so it's not like nearly as awful as the Algorand play, but still, man, this doesn't have enough chart history to be confident. Ultimately, what we would hope at this point for anybody holding theta is to just hold a back test on this 30 cent zone. Nothing to be overly confident about, but like we've now reclaimed all of the gains of the last cycle, and this is inevitable. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. I would even say that, like, didn't XRP kind of do something similar right here? So we had the crazy alt season move for XRP, and look at where it came back to. The same where it was trading at before. So it just gave back all of those gains. Now, of course, if you got in deep into the prior bear market, then you were fine, but the point still stands. This is not actually weird for venture capital positions. So we've just reclaimed all of that, not in a good way. We've given back is a better term. Everything that was given in that 2020 euphoria phase. So funny enough, we've now entered like the longest run of extreme fear. It's as above, so below, right? So there's really not too much to say on this. What I can say though is if it could break above $1.20, sharp move up to $3 is in the cards, and from where we're at now is almost 1,000%. So like, it's very possible that we're in the midst of a spring right now. It's not springboarding as fast as it did with the C19 crash, but this has been a slow drain ever since this liquidation ritual that happened back in October. So that's just what we're dealing with. That event really was an inside job. T-Fuel, likely the same. Yep. So T-Fuel effectively doing the exact same. Ooh, but very interesting. I had a inverse fib pulled from this breaking point right here up to the local swing high that we had. And we've tapped on the 1618. So this, I don't know, will need to fill the whole wick, but we've, again, the same thing as theta, which is not weird. Now, I would be looking to around 6 cents, and that's an area that, yeah, we like to see on T Fuel. Nothing crazy, 250% or so, but it's a good de-risk and on the higher end of what we've already seen. So for most people, that should be a profit play unless you bought absolute top. But yeah, this is a spring in Wyckoff unless we just keep folding down more and more. But we've just been so fucking bearish that how could we? I mean, of course, it could always get worse. It could always get worse in crypto. This is a tell sign. But in a lot of ways, I feel like what we just had recently was the leverage reset, and the C19 crash was a leverage reset. Let's go and finish off today's podcast with virtuals. Where are we at? Okay, this is an honorable mention too. Project that had a full-blown correction. Now it's up fucking 60% already. Pretty wild. I like the structure in this chart. This had a crazy run from 2024 September up to January 2025. Like, that's an alt season move right there. So be cautious here. Obviously, this is me telling you, like, some words of wisdom. Like, I am not expecting this to break out into price discovery, but what we can imagine is a return back to the 702 fib and up to the 888, and even $5 is very possible with this project. So this is one of those that I keep hearing people mention. They're definitely mentioning it for a reason. So I would pay attention to virtuals. If there was a new venture capital position, this is one of those alongside Render. Wouldn't mind picking up some. I feel generally the chart speaks for itself, so we don't really need to go too deep into that. But another thing to mention is, wow, we are back at 93K Bitcoin. So this is up at the upper end of what we saw early of last month, and we were getting rejected here a lot. So just keep that in mind, guys. This move right now, it's a very quick buyback. It happened right at the start of the year. That is a little sketchy. I got to admit, it's not something I would get super excited about, but also I'm looking to de-risk. I'm looking to make some plays this year in 2026. I have a lot of new things that I'm getting ready to launch. So my energy is being spread. I'm spinning a lot of plates, but I'm, of course, still showing up every single week, focused on these red pills, pouring my heart and soul into them. We've done a hell of a podcast today. I hope you guys appreciate it. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. First red pill of the year. We're starting off strong with a What I'm Investing in special, part 14. So appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. I'm wishing you all an amazing start to this new year in the Matrix. Much love.